Is your vehicle losing coolant and you're not quite sure where it's going? Today I'm going to show you how to diagnose your vehicle along with some tools and tricks that I've used over the years of working on cars. So let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, so today we're working on a 2010 Jeep Wrangler JKU. This vehicle has a coolant leak, so we need to go ahead and take care of this. We need to figure out where this coolant leak is coming from. We need to get the coolant pressure tester out. Alright, so here it is. There's a couple different tools for the coolant pressure tester. Some of them you can hook an air line up to, and instead of having to pump this handle to build pressure. But this is an old school one. I've had it for a long time. It comes with a couple different adapters. So first thing you need to do is locate your pressure cap. So it's either on your radiator or you might have a pressure tank. So on this Jeep Wrangler, it's the radiator here. So we're going to go ahead and see what the pressure rating is for this system. And it usually says right on your radiator cap or your pressure tank that you have. This one's 17. So we need to go ahead and, well, take this off. But before we take that radiator cap off, make sure the vehicle has been sitting a little while so the coolant is not hot. Most of the time, I'll stick a rag over the radiator cap that I'm taking off. So if some coolant does come up, it doesn't splash up and get you. But definitely make sure the vehicle has been sitting a while. This vehicle sat overnight, so it's definitely pretty cool. So, but before you get started pressure testing the system, you have to make sure that there is coolant in the system, because if there isn't coolant in the system, you're going to be pumping for a long time, and then you're never going to see the leak. So make sure there's coolant in the system. And second, definitely make sure that the coolant is not hot. If the coolant is hot when you're doing this pressure test, it can mess up the readings for the pressure test. As the coolant cools off, you'll end up losing pressure. So it could act as a potential leak, and there's not a leak there. So definitely make sure the coolant is not hot when you're doing this test. So let's go ahead and get started on it. All right, so once we've located the radiator cap where it's at, first thing you need to do is get your pressure tester out. So once we get the pressure tester out, this is how you want the end to look like before you stick it on the radiator. You want this part to be on the higher end, not the lower end, because you'll end up twisting this, and that's what's going to seal this pressure tester. So we got this off. You got to find the proper cap. Oh, dropping stuff. You have to find the proper cap for this radiator, which this one here is just what's on the tool, is the one that's for this radiator. So we're going to go ahead and get that on there. And then once you got the cap on there, then you just give this a twist. And that right there seals the system. So now you can go ahead and start pumping this pressure tester. And what you want to do is definitely make sure you look at what the pressure rating is on your cap. This one's 17. So I'm going to pump this up to about 16 to 17. All right, there we go. I got it pumped up just at the edge of 16. Now, like I said, make sure the coolant isn't hot when you're doing this, and make sure the coolant is full, because if not, you will not find the coolant leak if there's no coolant in it. And if it's hot, it's going to skew the reading. So just make sure the vehicle's been sitting a while before you do this pressure test. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to let this tester sit on here for about 10 minutes. And then I'm going to go around and check to see if I can find any leaks after that sits for about 10 minutes. So we're going to let this sit, and then we'll get back to it. So I let the pressure tester sit on here for about 10 minutes. And if you can see here, the pressure is starting to drop. This is a very small leak, so it might be a little challenging to find. So I'm going to go ahead and check this out and see if I can figure out where the coolant is leaking from. All right, so the leak wasn't bad enough to have any coolant dripping down on the ground, but I did end up finding the leak here. There's a very small crack on the radiator right below this upper hose. So let me see if I can show you guys. Okay, so here's where I found the leak. You can see my light down in there. It might be a little challenging, but there's a crack right there. You can see a little bit of residue right there on the radiator. So that's where my coolant leak's at. So if you have your pressure tester on there and you cannot find a leak on that in the engine bay anywhere or underneath the vehicle anywhere, the next step is what you need to do is go ahead and check on the inside of your vehicle and check to see if your passenger floorboard is wet, because it could be your heater core leaking. Now sometimes when it's bad enough, if your heater core is leaking, you are going to get like a sweet smell inside the cab when you're running any heat, and sometimes you'll smell it without running any heat. But you definitely need to check to see if your floorboard is wet. Potentially could be that heater core. Anyhow, all these specialty tools that I'm using will be linked in the description. They are Amazon affiliate links. But if you do buy my links, I greatly appreciate it. It helps out the channel. The next thing you need to do, if there's no leaks on the outside, you cannot find anything in the inside, but you do have a coolant leak, you're dropping pressure, the next thing you need to do is let me show you, this toolkit here. This is a combustion leak tester. So what this does, you put some fluid in your cylinder that you have here. There's usually a line, you fill it up with fluid. And what you do, you'll take the cap off the radiator, get the vehicle up to operating temperature, and then you want to make sure the cap's off, because you don't want to take the cap off with the vehicle up to operating temperature. That can be really bad. So make sure you take the cap off before you start the vehicle up. And then you want to make sure there's not a bunch of coolant at the very top of the radiator there, because if there is, if it gets sucked up into this, it can get inaccurate readings. So if there is, I usually take like a little turkey baster and you just suck a little coolant off the top. You can dip a rag in there and soak some coolant off the top there. And then what you do is you'll put this on top of your radiator with the coolant in the cylinder. And there's a little, usually a little squeezer at the top. You just pump it a couple of times, let it sit on there for a minute or so. And if the fluid inside this combustion checker turns yellow, that means you're getting exhaust gases inside your coolant system and you have a head gasket leak. So this is a really, really simple test to figure out if you got a head gasket issue. Now these are the two main tools I use when I have any kind of coolant leaks of any sort. So usually these two, I can really narrow it down to what the problem is. Now there are a couple other tricks. Maybe you're not seeing anything here with using either one of those tools. There are a couple other tricks that you can kind of help diagnose the problem. Number one, if you have a lot of white smoke coming out of your tailpipe, you have a head gasket issue. More likely you got a head gasket problem. So what's happening is you got water leaking in your cylinders and it's blowing out the tailpipe. So white smoke coming out of the tailpipe. The next thing what you can do is you can take your oil cap off of the engine and you look at that, and if you got any white or milky substance on the oil cap, normally you're getting coolant inside that oil. So that's a very bad thing. You don't want that happening. Also, you can pull the dipstick and look at the dipstick if you have any white milky residue on that. That can also show that you have a issue with coolant getting in the oil. Also, another way you can figure out if you're having issues is if you're getting bubbles in your pressure tank or your radiator and you can see bubbles coming out, more likely there's some exhaust gases coming into your radiator. And then for the final thing that I normally would do, if I'm not seeing anything anywhere else, I'll go ahead and pull the spark plugs. If your spark plugs has a white residue on them, or maybe they look like they've been steam cleaned, like they're extra clean, or some rust or anything like that, you could potentially be getting coolant in your spark plugs. So that could be a bad thing also. But if you're not seeing any leaks, definitely you can check those areas. So white smoke coming from the tailpipe, white milky residue inside your oil, it's either on your dipstick or your oil cap, or potentially your spark plugs look like they're steam clean, they have a white residue on them, or they're getting rusty. So any of those things that you see, there's coolant leaking into those areas. Okay, well that's it, guys. Hopefully that helps you narrow down any issues that you're having with your vehicle. I've used these tools and these tricks for the last 15 years, and I would have to say 100% of the time I was able to find the coolant leak with these tools or those tricks. So if this video helped you guys out, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll greatly appreciate it. You guys have a good one.